She thought moving into this quiet, picture-perfect neighborhood would finally bring her peace. Instead, it turned into a nightmare she never saw coming. One simple rule violation spiraled into harassment, threats, and a shocking act so cruel it left her shaken to the core. Imagine watching the very people meant to protect the community use their power to tear it apart, and then realizing the law itself might not be on your side. But when the truth finally surfaced, it exposed a secret so explosive the entire HOA was forced to face consequences they never expected. What really happened behind those closed doors? At first, everything about the neighborhood felt like a dream. Tree-lined sidewalks, neatly trimmed lawns, and neighbors who smiled as they passed. It seemed like the perfect place to settle down. For Emily, a young woman starting over with her loyal service dog Daisy, this was supposed to be a fresh chapter of peace and stability. She loved the way Daisy trotted proudly by her side, always alert and gentle, a companion who gave her both independence and comfort. But behind the postcard-perfect image of the community, cracks were waiting to show. The HOA board, known for its endless rules, had a reputation for keeping things in order, sometimes at a cost. From mailbox colors to lawn heights, even the smallest details could draw scrutiny. And for newcomers, the message was clear: fit the mold, or you'll find yourself under their watchful eye. Emily didn't think much of it at first. She just wanted to enjoy quiet evenings in her home, walks with Daisy, and the relief of finally feeling safe. Yet, beneath that calm surface, something was brewing. A clash between her sense of freedom and the HOA's thirst for control was inevitable. She had no idea that her loyal dog, the very heart of her healing, would soon become the target of that battle. At first, the HOA's presence was just an irritation small enough to ignore. Emily would come home to find notes tucked under her doormat, reminders about keeping her trash cans hidden, warnings about leaving her car parked too long in the driveway. They weren't personal, she thought, just the board's way of micromanaging every detail. But soon it became clear these weren't just harmless notices. They were targeted. One morning, she returned from walking Daisy to find a letter taped to her front door in bold red lettering. This is a final warning. Animals must be restrained and remain within the confines of the property at all times. Emily's stomach twisted. Daisy was not just an animal, she was a certified service dog, legally protected, essential to Emily's daily life. Yet the HOA seemed determined to treat her as nothing more than a nuisance. The harassment escalated. Each week, another fine appeared in the mail, $50 for excessive barking, even though Daisy was silent and trained, $75 for unsightly activity when Emily sat on her porch with Daisy at her feet, $100 for unauthorized signage when a small service dog tag hung by her front window. The rules seemed to change overnight, tailored specifically to push her into submission. Neighbors began whispering. Some looked away when she passed, fearful of attracting the HOA's wrath themselves. Others gave sympathetic nods but offered no help. Emily felt the walls closing in. Her home, once a refuge, now felt like a prison, where every move was watched and reported, and the one being she relied on the most, her dog, had somehow become the bullseye of the HOA's campaign. It didn't stop at fines. One evening, as Emily returned from the grocery store, she noticed her lawn had been flagged with bright orange stakes. A notice followed the next morning. Non-compliant landscaping. Immediate correction required. Emily's heart pounded. She hadn't touched the yard since moving in. The grass was neat, the shrubs trimmed. It made no sense. But when she questioned the HOA president at the next community meeting, she was met with a chilling smile. "It's about standards," the woman said coolly, "and keeping this neighborhood uniform. If you can't manage that, perhaps this isn't the right community for you." Emily left the meeting shaken. The message was clear. This wasn't about rules anymore. It was personal. Daisy, ever loyal, sensed her distress. But Emily's fear deepened when the harassment crossed into something darker. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Daisy ran to the edge of the yard to greet a passing child. She didn't bark, didn't lunge, she simply wagged her tail. Minutes later, Emily found another notice. This one slipped under her windshield wiper. Uncontrolled animal behavior. Final citation. And then, the incident happened. The one that turned Emily's frustration into pure outrage. Daisy had been sitting quietly on the porch, enjoying the sun, when a neighbor stormed across the yard. It was the same HOA board member who had smirked at Emily during the meeting. Without warning, the woman pulled a spray bottle from her pocket and misted Daisy directly in the face. Daisy yelped, backing away in fear. Emily rushed forward, horrified, demanding to know what she was doing. Emily's hands trembled as she held Daisy, who was shaking from the chemical sting. She wanted to scream, to fight back, but the power imbalance was overwhelming. This wasn't just petty rule enforcement anymore. It was cruelty. It was personal. And it was escalating beyond anything she could have imagined. But the HOA had underestimated her. Emily began documenting everything: the notices, the fines, the false accusations, even the spray attack. The courtroom was smaller than Emily had imagined, but the weight of the moment pressed down on her like a heavy fog. Every seat was filled: neighbors, curious residents, even rival HOA board members who wanted to witness how this would play out. At the front of the room, the HOA president sat smugly beside her attorney, stacks of paperwork spread across the table like weapons. Emily sat quietly with Daisy curled under her chair, her hands trembling as she clutched her own folder of evidence. The judge called the session to order, and the HOA's lawyer wasted no time. He painted Emily as a rule breaker, a defiant resident unwilling to follow reasonable community standards. He listed every fine, every supposed violation, every fabricated complaint. Each accusation was read with the same venom: failure to comply, disruptive animal behavior, threat to community safety. When it was her turn to speak, Emily stood, her knees threatening to buckle. She began slowly, her voice shaking as she explained Daisy's role. How this wasn't just a dog, but a certified service animal who helped her live independently. She pulled out documents, official certifications, letters from her doctor, even federal guidelines that explicitly protected her right to have Daisy with her. The silence that followed was deafening. For months, Emily had been made to feel small, powerless, cornered. But in that moment, standing tall in front of everyone, she felt stronger than she ever had before. The HOA's case collapsed in that instant. Their accusations dissolved under the clarity of the law, their carefully constructed narrative undone by their own arrogance. Emily knelt down, wrapping her arms around Daisy, who nuzzled her face as if sensing the victory. Tears stung her eyes, not just from relief, but from vindication. They had tried to strip her dignity, to make her feel like an outcast in her own home. But now, the truth was undeniable. The ruling should have ended the matter right then and there. But what happened after the judge's gavel fell was just as impactful as the court's decision itself. In the days that followed, the community buzzed with whispers. For years, the HOA board had carried themselves like untouchable monarchs, their rules unquestioned, their punishments feared. But now, their authority had been dragged into the light, their cruelty laid bare for all to see. The very next HOA meeting was unlike any before. What was normally a sleepy gathering of a few board members and reluctant homeowners turned into a packed house. Residents filled every chair, some standing along the walls, their arms crossed and eyes locked on the board members seated at the front. One by one, residents spoke up. An elderly couple revealed how they'd been fined for having a bird feeder on their porch. A young family explained how they'd been threatened over the color of their mailbox. A veteran quietly shared that he'd been warned about flying a small flag in his yard. Each story added to the pile of grievances, and each voice chipped away at the facade of power the board had built. Emily sat quietly near the back with Daisy at her side, listening as the tide turned. She didn't need to speak. The community was finally finding its voice. And when someone stood to nominate a motion to recall the board, the room erupted in applause. The vote was swift and decisive. By the end of the night, the HOA president and her closest allies were stripped of their positions. As the weeks turned to months, the neighborhood began to change. The new HOA leadership adopted a different tone, less authoritarian, more collaborative. Instead of punishments and threats, they introduced community projects, garden cleanups, holiday events, even a dog-friendly park space. The residents, once divided by fear, began to connect in ways they hadn't before. It was as though the storm had finally passed, and something better had grown in its place.